Okay, good morning class. So we are now on the continuation of our topic. We are still on the electromagnetic spectrum. But today we are to discuss the photon wave particle duality. So the last time we have discussed all the three parameters of the electromagnetic spectrum. We said there is the frequency, the wavelength, so the relationship of the frequency and wavelength that is described using the sine wave equation, di ba? V equals frequency times lambda. And we have also another parameter, no, along with the frequency and wavelength, there is the energy. So the relationship between energy and frequency is described using the Planck's quantum theory. E equals hf. So we have the constant proportionality h with a value of 4.15 times 10 raised to the negative 15 electron volts second. So before we move on with our discussion for this morning, so let us first read the introduction. So you already unlocked major parameters of X-ray photon: the frequency, the wavelength, and energy. However, a photon of X radiation and a photon of visible light are fundamentally the same, except that X radiation has much higher frequency and shorter wavelength. Yon. So, in fact, both types of photons exhibit both types of behavior, a phenomenon known as the wave-particle duality of X radiation. Remember that visible light and X-ray belong to the electromagnetic spectrum. So, either each can behave as wave and another one or the other can behave as the particle. So there's the phenomenon again, which is what we call the wave-particle duality. Doble cara. Hindi lang siya wave, hindi lang siya particle, but the other way, pwede siyang mag-act as a wave at pwede din siyang mag-act as a particle. So, when we say particle again, di ba, yung kaibahan ng particulate radiation from electromagnetic radiation kasi there is the mass. So therefore, this morning we will have to incorporate another parameter, which is mass equivalence. Okay, sige. Let's start with our discussion with the theory of relativity. Sino ba sa inyo ang hindi alam kung ano ang theory of relativity? Of course, alam niyo yan since most of you went through your high school, di ba? Especially sa mga sciences na subject. So, according to the quantum physics and the physics of relativity, matter can be transformed into energy and vice versa. So, we have a classical example. So, example of a wood. Di ba? You burned the wood. So, hindi nawala ang kahoy. Only it transformed from one form to another. So, from a wood itself, naging heat. So, there is, sabi nga natin before, the energy is constant. It only transforms from one form to another. So, the relationship between energy and mass can be calculated using the Einstein's theory of relativity. According to Albert Einstein, energy is equivalent to mass equivalence multiplied by velocity, or E equals mc squared. This is a very popular formula actually. So I guess most of you knows this equation. Okay? Sige, before we move on, before in our discussion on the Planck's quantum theory, so we used a constant proportionality H. Teka lang. So we used a constant proportionality H with a value of 4.15 times 10 raised to the negative 15 electron volts second. So this morning, we are to convert, So ipapakilala natin ang isa pang mukha ng energy, which is now in terms of joules. So i-disregard muna natin itong value na to. So, we are now to use this value. 6.63 times 10 raised to the negative 34 joule second. So, if the problem requires you to convert joule second or joules into electron volt or electron volt to joules, pwede yun. So, this is our conversion factor. For every 1 joule, ito yung equivalent niya. 6.24 times 10 raised to 18 electron volts. So, you can convert that. Okay? So, remember again that the 3 parameters that was discussed in our previous meeting. So, we have frequency. We said that this is the oscillation per second, or this is the rate of the rise and fall of a sine wave. So, we have the wavelength. Diba? Wavelength. So, this is from, let's say, a crest to another crest, or one valley to another valley, or from any one portion of a sine wave to the next corresponding point. So, wavelength is measured in terms of meter or angstrom. Yung frequency naman is measured in terms of hertz or per second. So, we also have another parameter which was discussed previously. So, we have the velocity. But we said that velocity in the electromagnetic spectrum is constant. That is equivalent to 3.0 times 10 raised to 8 meter per second, or that is equivalent to 186,000 miles per second. Okay. So, let's take this problem. So, what is the energy equivalence of an electron? Okay, the mass of an electron is equivalent to 9.1 times 10 raised to the negative 31 kilogram. So, we are going to find the energy in joules and in terms of electron volt second. So, again, ano yung gagamitin nating formula? When there is the problem, tapos makita nyo given yung mass, of course, papasok sa inyong mga isip yung theory of relativity. Very good. But today, hindi nyo muna ako makikita sa video kasi tinatamad ako mag-edit. Sekreto lang natin, class. Okay, so ito yung answer natin sa problem na ito. So, we are going to use again, kasi nandun si mass, so the theory of relativity, which is the mass of an electron is 9.1 times 10 raised to the negative 31 kilogram. So, our velocity of light, which is constant in a vacuum, that is 3.0 times 10 raised to 8 meter per second. So, kasi sa ating theory of relativity, the speed of light constant is raised to the power of 2. Okay, so hanapin muna natin yung square ng speed of light. So, 3 times 3 is 9. So, 18 times 2 is 16. So, therefore, C squared is 9.0 times 10 raised to 16 meters squared per second squared. Multiply it by the mass of an electron, equivalent to 9.1 times 10 raised to the negative 31 kilogram. So, that will give you a value of 81 times 10 raised to the negative 15 joule second. So, since this is an improper scientific notation, so gagawin natin siyang proper scientific notation. So, take note, negative yung exponent niya. So, the decimal is nasa left side. So, magmo-move tayo ng one place towards the left. So, magiging mas malapit tayo sa ating decimal point. So, ang adjustment ng ating exponent again, so babawasan natin ng isa. So, our answer in terms of joules, that is 8.1 times 10 raised to the negative 14 joules. But our problem requires you to find the energy in terms of electron volt. So, ito yung magiging conversion natin, class. So, yung answer natin kanina in terms of joules. Ito yun. So, 8.1 times 10 raised to the negative 14 joules. So, again, isipin natin na for every 1 joule, there are 6.24 times 10 raised to 18 electron volts. Ito. So, cancel natin si joules. So what remains is electron volts. So combine all the whole numbers, 8.1 and 6.24, and combine all the exponents, negative 14 plus positive 18, so that will give you positive 4. So 8.1 times 6.24, that is 50.5 times 10 raised to the positive 4 electron volt. So this is an improper scientific notation, so we have to move the decimal point going to the left. So positive exponent, meaning yung decimal nasa right. So magmo-move tayo ng one place towards the left, which means we are going to move away or farther from our decimal point. So our adjustment sa exponent will be to add 1. So our answer is 5.1 times 10 raised to 5 electron volt second. Okay, so did you get the same answer? Of course, kasi given na to sa module. So again, if you have questions, do not hesitate. I will be willing to answer any queries. Alam nyo na how to reach me out, okay? Sige, now let's come to the next problem. So, an X-ray photon produces a frequency of 2.7 times 10 raised to 18 Hertz. So, what is its mass equivalence? Okay, class. So, you are now going to ask me, Sir, wala naman sa theory of relativity frequency. So, anong gagawin natin? So, now we are going to combine the Planck's quantum theory and the theory of relativity. So, naalala nyo si quantum theory. Diba, we are going to find for energy gihapon, HF. And then, sa theory of relativity, we are also asked to find for the energy. So, energy equals mc squared. Burahin na lang natin kaya si energy kasi parehas lang naman silang naghahanap ng energy. So, therefore, HF equals mc squared. Ayun naman pala. So, if the problem has the given frequency, tapos hahanapin natin si mass equivalence, gaya nito, so therefore, we are going to divide both sides with the c squared. Kasi ito yung hahanapin natin, di ba? So, we are going to divide both sides with the square of the speed of light. So, therefore, to find for the mass equivalence, yun. So, h, the Planck's constant, multiplied by the frequency, divided by the speed of light constant in a vacuum raised to the power of 2. So, ito na yun. Charan! Yan! So, ito na yung ating magiging equation or magiging formula. So, now let's substitute our equation. So, H, again, we are now going to use the Planck's constant in terms of joule second. So, the value, do not forget, that is, instead of using the 4.15 times 10 raised to the negative 15 electron volt second, so our value now will become 6.63 times 10 raised to the negative 34 joule second. By the way, class, I forgot to tell you, ito, okay, so if you can still remember our discussion, module 1, if I'm not mistaken, so when we say 1 joule, so that is equivalent to kilogram meter squared per second squared. No? So, yun yung equivalent niya. Kasi nga si Newton is 1 kilogram meter per second squared, diba? Mass times acceleration. So, si Joule, that is the force times distance. So, kilogram meter squared per second squared yung derivation niya. Okay, so, going back. So, our given for the frequency is 2.7 times 10 raised to 18 per second or 2.7 times 10 times 10. Ano ba? Raised to 18 hertz. Okay, so we substituted hertz into per second. So, cancel natin yung per second. Okay, so speed of light, that is constant, 3.0 times 10 raised to 18 raised to 8 meter per second. So, raise meter per second raised to the power of 2. So, unahin muna natin. So, that will become 9.0 times 10 raised to 16 meters squared per second squared. So, saan natin to pinagdadampot? Ito, yung joule, na-simplify natin as kilogram meter squared per second squared. So, therefore, we are going to cancel meter squared per second squared both sa numerator at denominator. Okay, so we are to combine the whole numbers and the exponents. So, yung unit natin is only kilogram na lang. Ay, sad. Yan. Para mahanap natin talaga si mass. Yun. So, di ba, there's a unit for mass is kilogram. So, combine all the whole numbers and combine all the exponents. So, 6.63 times 2.7, that will give you 17.9. So, andito pa yung isa pang whole number nasa denominator side. So, therefore, 17.9 divided by 9. So, that is 1.99. So, rule of exponent, when we are to divide exponents, we are going to change the sign of the denominator, then proceed to addition. So, yung positive 16 magiging negative 16. Tama ba? Yes. And then, meron pa tayong another negative 16. So, negative 16 plus negative 16, that will become negative 32. So, final answer, this is now expressed in proper scientific notation. So, that is 1.99 times 10 raised to the negative 32 kilogram. Whew. So, napagod ba ako? Hindi naman. Okay lang naman, class. Okay, again, so if you have questions, I know there are. Huwag na kayong magpaka-paka na parang kaya balitaw. So, if you have questions, do not hesitate again. My line is open. You may ask me. Okay? So, since we are now talking about the wave and particle, so therefore, when like light, so it matters with distance. Tama ba? Sige daw, kuha kayong flashlight and then direct mo siya in a certain wall. Tapos, move ka away or further from the wall. So, what will happen to the light? Diba? Nagdi-decrease ang kanyang brightness, ang kanyang intensity. Actually, we have said this when we discussed the SID doon sa ating isang subject sa RT213 sa Principles of Imaging. Kaya lang, yung diniscuss natin most probably is the distance maintenance law, the compensation of MAS as a result of increasing or decreasing the distance. Kasi nga, magdi-decrease ang kanyang intensity if mag-increase tayo ng distance. So, nagko-compensate tayo ng MAS. Now, here, sa inverse square law, we are just talking about the intensity. Let's just consider the brightness. For the meantime, brightness ng light. Let's say that is the intensity. So, what will happen to the brightness of the light when you move away or farther from a wall or a certain point? Diba, nag-decrease, di rin na siya ganun kasuna. Medyo madilim na ang paligid. Yun. So, that implies the use of the distance. Kasi nga, wave and particle or let's say, electromagnetic spectrum as a whole. Okay, so when light is emitted from a source such as the sun or a light bulb, the intensity decreases rapidly with the distance from the source. So, the decrease in intensity is inversely proportional to the square of the distance of the object from the source. And their relationship of the decrease of intensity with respect to distance is described using the inverse square law. So, mathematically, this is called the inverse square law and expressed as intensity 1 over intensity 2 or I sub 1 over I sub 2 equals distance 2 squared over distance 1 squared. So, class inverse. Yung partner ni 1 dapat nasa baba. Pag si 2 nasa baba, yung partner niya dapat nasa taas. Class, wag naman kayong mag-isip ng green ha. I'm not talking about mga ganong bagay. Bata pa tayo. So where intensity 1 is the intensity at distance 1 from the source and intensity 2 is the intensity at distance 2 from the source. So yung magiging advice ko na lang sa inyo class, if you encounter problems na which you're going to find intensity or distance, always look for either intensity 2 or distance 2. So, pag makita nyo yung problem na partner na yung intensity at distance, so automatic, yung intensity there is intensity 1 at distance 1. So, yung walang partner, either intensity or distance, so sila yung magiging quantity 2. The second variable. Okay, so for example, the dose rate from a radiation source is 200 milliröntgen per hour at a distance of 2 meters. So, ito yung sinasabi ko. So, meron tayong intensity at distance. So, automatic na yan. Intensity 1 at distance 1. So, what will be the dose if the person moves nearer to the source? Okay, so balikan muna natin yung former slide. So, if you are going to find, again, kasi yung suggestion ko, always find for the second variable, intensity 2 or distance 2. So, pag si intensity 2, so that will be equivalent to intensity 1 quantity. So, yung partner ni intensity 2 nasa baba, distance 2. 2 yan ha, 2. So, distance 1. So, this will be raised to the power of 2. Yan. If you're going to find for distance 2, so distance 1 squared. Ito, dapat distance 2 squared yan. Sige. Okay, so quantity, yung partner ni 2, dapat nasa baba. Intensity 2 over intensity 1. Diba? Kasamok. Okay, so tanggalon natin. Kintanggal ko na kasi raised to the power of 2 sa distance 2. Kaya natanggal siya using square root. So therefore, to find for distance 2, that is the square root of distance 1 squared quantity intensity 1 over intensity 2. Okay, gets? So ganun. Always find for the second variable. Bakit ka pa naghahanap ng iba? Andyan naman siya. So, applicable yan dito sa problem solving. So, sa love life, hindi siguro applicable na maghanap pa ng second. Kung meron na. Sana all. Okay, so sa problem again. So, 200 milliröntgen per hour. Automatic siya yung ating intensity 1 at distance 2 meters. So, distance 1. What will be the dose rate if a person moves 1 meter nearer to the source? So, applying the inverse square law, so our problem, kita nyo naman, nag-move tayo 1 meter nearer. So, what will be your expectation sa intensity? Is it higher or lower than 200 milliröntgen per hour? Charan! Kailangan higher sa 200 milliröntgen per hour yung answer natin, ha? Kasi from 2 meters, naging 1 meter na lang siya. Applying the inverse square law, kailangan yon mas magi-increase yung intensity. Sige, let's answer this problem in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Wala akong video. I will just be discussing over, voice over ko na lang yung ating sagot. Okay, so intensity 1, again, that is 200 milliröntgen per hour. So, missing yung intensity 2. Yun yung hanapin natin. So, sa problem, automatic, yung partner ni 200 milliröntgen per hour, which is 2 meter. So, gagawin natin siyang distance 1. So, distance, ayan. So, the distance 2, yung walang partner, is 1 meter. So, again, as per advice, kailangan hanapin natin yung second variable. Intensity 2 equals intensity 1 quantity distance 1 squared over distance 2 squared. So, kita nyo, yung partner ni intensity 2, si distance 2 nasa baba. Yun yung inverse. Pag direct square law, kailangan kung nandun sa taas si intensity 2, yung partner niya nasa taas. So, inverse tayo ha. So, substitute. Our intensity 1 is 200 millirentgen per hour. Our distance 1 is, ayun, 2 meters. And our distance 2 is 1 meter. So, cancel natin meter. So, 2 divided by 1 is 2. 2 times 2, that will be 4. So, multiply mo by 200 millirentgen per hour. So, our answer, tcharan, 800 millirentgen per hour. Mas mataas or mas mababa? Of course, kasi nag-decrease tayo ng distance, our intensity should be mas mataas sa 200 millirentgen per hour. Okay? Ang galing talaga ng mga BSRT2 students. So again, if you have questions, do not hesitate. I will be waiting. Okay? So our last problem is ito. So the exposure rate to a body 2 meters from the source of radiation is 28 rentgen per hour. So what distance from the source would be necessary to decrease the exposure rate to 7 rentgen per hour? So nag-decrease tayo ng intensity. From 28 rentgen per hour, naging 7 rentgen per hour. So, what will be our answer? Should be, nag-increase ba tayo or nag-decrease ng distance? Higher or lower than 2 meters? Of course, so problem, may kita mo na nag-increase tayo ng distance. So, our answer should be higher than 2 meters. So, sa problem, may kita mo, nandito si intensity 1, tapos intensity 2. Nandito si intensity 2. Yan. Intensity 1, distance 1. Tapos, ito si intensity 2. So, we are to find for distance 2. Diba? I've given you naman the formula. So, again, our given intensity 1 is 28 rentgen per hour. Intensity 2 is 7 rentgen per hour. Distance 2 and 1 is 2 meters. And distance 2 is, of course, missing in action. So, our formula, distance 2 squared, quantity, distance 1 squared, ayan. Quantity, intensity 1 over intensity 2. So, therefore, we are going to find the square root of distance 1 squared over this quantity, intensity 1 over intensity 2. So, let us substitute our distance 1 is 2 meter. That will be raised to 2. Tapos, our intensity 1 is 28 rentgen per hour. Our intensity 2 is 7 rentgen per hour. So, cancel natin rentgen per hour and rentgen per hour. So, to find, again, that will be the square root of 2 meters squared, quantity 28 divided by 7. So, let's divide muna 28 divided by 7. So, that is equivalent to 4. So, ito siya. 4. So, yung distance 1 will be raised to the power of 2. So, therefore, 2 times 2 is 4. Meter times meter is meter squared. So, the square root of 4 meter squared multiplied by 4. So, that will be 16 meter squared. So, square root of 16 meter squared is, of course, that is 4 meters. Of course, that confirms our expectation, which is the distance will be higher than 2 meters. Okay, so that ends our discussion for this morning. So check nyo yung email nyo mamaya or probably yung group chat natin sa Messenger. So I will be giving a quiz and that should be submitted today. So thank you so much for watching. And again, if you have questions, do not hesitate. So see you next time. Goodbye!